Hello, everyone. Welcome back to just another esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and our co host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. This past weekend, or I guess 2 weekends ago, we had the Florida homestand series with a lot of upsets. Our brackets definitely were not the best. A lot of incorrect match records and a lot of orange ones, which means that we got at least one of the teams correct in that group, but we got which team was coming out of that matchup incorrect. So, not a very good weekend for us on our prediction side, but we'll be going over those. And then we'll also be diving into our Seattle predictions, which will be happening this weekend. And so, kind of, I guess the biggest takeaway for me for this weekend was how a bunch of the top seeded teams, or the teams that we thought would do really well at this event, didn't really show up. It seemed like either they had an off event or a lot of the teams were just catching up. And so it's going to be very interesting to see moving forward if that is the case or if they just had a bad event.
Oh man, I'd like to think that this is a fluke, but I mean, because this just kind of turns the whole league on its head. This whole event just changes so much about who teams are, what the worst teams in the league are, who the best teams in the league are, with the exception of Atlanta, of course. But I mean, this was just an unbelievable tournament, and I don't know if there's anybody here that predicted the semifinals, let alone the finals. So many crazy upsets, so many teams that have improved so much from just such little roster changes. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. And I'm extremely excited to talk about it because I noticed some cool, interesting stats with some of these lower seeded teams that I'm going to be bringing up. And so moving right into that with our first Group A matchup, not on the weekend, but the first one we'll be discussing was the upset of Toronto versus New York, where Toronto lost to, or not Toronto lost, Toronto beat New York 3-1. So we've been talking about Toronto is this team that's at the lower end of the CDL. However, they played all their series incredibly close to the point where we could see them doing well in the series, but not winning it. And I think that is marked there where you gave New York the win 3-2 over Toronto. However, Toronto decided, hey, you know what? We're sick of going far in these series and not being able to close it out. So, you know what? We're just going to close it out. And that's what they did.
I think
3-1 over New York.
I think that's the theme of this whole event. Actually, you have a bunch of teams that you know almost made it a bunch of times, and they just couldn't quite get there. And now they felt like this was their opportunity. I'm sure that New York, Toronto, and or New York and Toronto felt like they could get out of Group A. Felt like Florida and Minnesota were a bunch of bums. It wasn't Dallas or Chicago in there, so or Atlanta. So they felt like they could take this opportunity and run with it. Same thing in Group B with Optic. I feel like Optic probably felt like London and Paris. I don't know who are they, but these are teams historically that have gone to Game Fives and lost. They go to round 11s and lose. They almost make it. It's like, oh man, they almost won, but almost unfortunately doesn't count, as we see in many matches, but not this one for Toronto, as Toronto takes this pretty easily, actually, in a 3-1. I was not super impressed with New York's gameplay at any point in this match. I know they peeled, was it the Dom off of Toronto? But,
They took the first hard point
oh,
off of
sorry, yes,
Toronto.
that's right. They took the first hard point off of Toronto, and it wasn't even like a great hard point. It was close, but it wasn't something like, you know, blew me away. And then Toronto just kind of took the torch and ran with it. Bance played out of his mind the entire tournament. Mustachioed methods, looking very good this tournament, pulling off some disgusting stats. I think his what was his overall respawn KD? I didn't see EasyMax sheet
His overall KD is a 1.28
for the
Easy
event.
method for the event. Yep. The lowest on the Toronto Ultra was Bance at a 0.81. So that's on somewhat of the lower spectrum, but that's not bad since Bance usually kind of plays that entry role along the side of Metals and Classic. And then everyone else on the team, you had Classic at a 1.09. You had Cammy about even at a 0.99, and then you had Metals at a 0.94. So
Now, Cammy's another guy that I really want to talk about in this Toronto roster because Cammy was playing like I don't even know. It wasn't like he was even thinking. He was just doing the exact right play in so many search matches, and
yeah, his search and destroy this weekend was absolutely disgusting, especially his sniper gameplay was phenomenal. I think that was one of the highlights of this weekend was all the good snipers that we got to see. We got to see
oh my
Dashy, we got to see Simp, we
gosh,
got to see Wuskins, and we got to see Cammy. So bunch
yeah,
of really good snipes this weekend.
this was actually a phenomenal weekend to see some really good sniper gameplay. You saw Dashy go up against Weskins and Simp. You saw Cammy just play some really weird angles and do a lot with it. There's so many things as far as gameplay goes that now we're gonna have to kind of fold this into all of the little tips and tricks that we've learned since this game's come out that the pros are teaching us at every event, and it's interesting and it's kind of refreshing to see these newer or these teams that are originally on the bottom teaching us a lot about the game.
Yeah, this weekend I think could also be marked by how kind of competitive every single match was. There weren't really any blowouts in the hard points or the DOMs. The S&Ds were incredibly close. I think the only real blowout in probably the hard points was when the Atlanta FaZe matched up against Paris on St. Petrograd. But that was pretty much the only map where a team just kind of got completely obliterated in a respawn, at least to my recollection. We had some incredibly close DOMs, some amazing comebacks on the side of Optic almost twice. So, and this going back to talking about Toronto, and one of the reasons we kept on saying, okay, this Toronto team, they're a scary team because they keep on dragging out these series, and why we kind of had faith in this team, even though they were at 20 points. I'm going to list off some statistics real quick. So their S&D, which they have a 8-9 record in, a losing record in, their total round win percentage is 53.55%, which is third highest out of any team in the league. The only teams that have a better S&D round win percentage than them is Dallas at a 56%, and then right above them, Atlanta at a 57% round win percentage. Toronto, with a losing record in search and destroy, has a 53.55 round win percentage. So this is why Toronto is scary. Yes, they may not win a lot, but they will give you a heart attack throughout the entire series because they are so close to winning so many times. And this weekend was just their weekend that they are actually able to start getting those wins. They're currently on a 5-win streak in domination. They were 3-0 this weekend. So that's looking like a pretty good mode for them there, as well as all the other teams have been saying they're incredibly scary in S&D, and that 53.55 round win percentage with the losing record certainly shows that. And so if this team starts stepping up their dom, they can definitely start moving up the standings and be a very scary dark horse in kind of any of these upcoming homestand weekends.
I'm telling you, it's the mustache.
It's the
I'm
mustache.
telling you, it's Method's mustache. It's got to be it. Like, there's no other explanation for the slight change, the slight increase, other than the fact that Methods grew a mustache. If you haven't seen
Well,
it,
I can think of a reason. It's because they didn't make a roster change this event. They stuck with the same roster that they played at the Dallas event.
yeah, I mean, you could say that, but like I said, the only roster change they made, mustachioed Methods, and now they're a playoff team or they're a semifinals team.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna try
they're
to connect the
semifinals.
dots for the audience, but like you guys can see the clear evidence. It's the mustache. It has to be. Like the writing's on the wall. Methods do not shave your mustache.
Trim, don't shave.
Trim. Yes, nice trim.
All right, moving on to our next series. It was a rematch of our Dallas homestand grand finals. It was Florida versus Minnesota. However, this time it was handedly in the favor of Minnesota. They swept the Florida Mutineers 3-0 in that series. So I got that one correct. However, I thought it was going to be an incredibly close series, and that it was not. So quite disappointing there after the really good look that we did see out of Florida at that Dallas event. And I think a lot of this can be attributed to the X factors on this team. You look at Havoc and you look at Mox. They had an incredibly bad weekend. You have Mox at a .76, and then you had Havoc at a .81, and they weren't even the worst KDs on the team. You had Frosty at a .73. So
Yeah, this is
you can't have three players that low in the negative and be expected to make it out of groups.
no. You can't expect to win a match, a single map. You can't. You have
I mean,
to
they
win your
didn't
gun
win a
battles.
single map. They didn't win a single
They
map
didn't
this
win
weekend.
a single map.
They went 0-6 this weekend.
Embarrassing, absolutely embarrassing for an organization that has Pristini on the bench. You have one of the best players in Call of Duty just sitting around, and you go 0-6. Like, organizationally, how do you explain that? From a management perspective, how do you explain that? I mean, yeah, you guys were winning. Now you're not. And now you sat a player who doesn't even want to play for you anymore. Rumor has it won't play for you anymore. And you got egg on your face because you decided that that was going to be the move that you stuck with. Am I saying that Florida's out forever? Are they the worst team in Call of Duty? No, I don't think that's what this event is. But this was pretty tragic for Florida fans to see their team, who was, a borderline top 5 team in CDL, go to, I don't know. I don't Nick, I have no idea what happened to Florida. I genuinely have no idea. Like, the mojo was gone. What happened here?
To be honest, I don't know. I do kind of want to just say maybe it was a bad event. We saw some pretty good consistency out of Florida. They made a semifinals appearance, and they made two finals appearances. One they lost, one they won. And so this was probably the worst look we've seen from the Florida Mutineers since probably the Minnesota event. And so it'll be very interesting to see them as kind of the weekends progress, because they did play Minnesota and New York. They played two extremely good teams. And I'm going to go out as far to say that New York was the second best team at this event. And we'll get to the reasons probably why once we get to where they fall out of the tournament in their semifinals matchup versus Atlanta. But they played two really good teams. They played in New York, that's on the rise, and they played in Minnesota, who we've put in the same tier at them. Now, does that mean that they can go 0-6 on that weekend and be fine with it? No. But if they're having an off weekend and they're playing teams that are that good that we put in their skill range, then getting 3-0'd by them, yeah, that's going to happen. And so I don't think it's time to hit the panic button yet.
No, I don't think it's a panic button.
The reason they made the change to Pharaoh, there was reasoning behind that. Pristini wasn't a good fit for the team in their eyes. And so that's why they made the change. And if they're going to stick with that, and they showed that they can have success with the team, and honestly, I do just kind of want to say it was a bad weekend. But we'll have to see as it progresses. Maybe it was teams figured them out. But with just one weekend showing, it's kind of too early to say. Moving on to our next series, though, we saw the Atlanta FaZe versus the Paris Legion. Both of us got that right. Atlanta beat them. It was a 3-1. It was pretty close in the first hard point, and the S&D, I believe the S&D went to a round 11 against Paris, if I'm correct. Yes, it went to a round 11. But after that, the series kind of felt like it was over. The domination was incredibly close. But after that, the last hard point, that's kind of where FaZe really showed up, and they kind of put the dagger into Paris and sat them down, put them down into that losers bracket. And so this event, we kind of did see a resurgence from the Atlanta FaZe. They definitely didn't look as abysmal as they had in Hardpoint this weekend. And honestly, I believe it was their best game mode. I mean, pretty much every game mode was extremely good. The one where you can't really say it was their worst one, they went 3-2 in it. That was their S&D. Their Hardpoint, though, they went 6-2 in this weekend. And then their domination, they went 3-1 in. So Atlanta FaZe decided, yeah, we don't like losing, so
We're just
those
gonna
2
win.
weeks, yeah, we're just gonna win,
Just gonna win it
and
all.
that's what they did.
I said in the last podcast that this tournament was Atlanta's to take, and they did not disappoint. This whole tournament, they were basically lights out. Couple close series at the end with New York, and kind of a close series at the end with Optic, but in the beginning they were just running over teams. I will say that this Paris Atlanta one was not a close one at all for Paris, and I think what we learned from Paris is that they. I genuinely can't really put my finger on it as far as why Paris just can't perform consistently. And I mean, you can point to specific people, but
Yeah, I think you can point to specific people. At the start of the year, what did we say about Paris? We said that this is a scarily inconsistent roster.
true.
And the two people we looked at was Kismet and Zed. And lo and behold, those are the two players that are drastically inconsistent event to event. And this was not Kismet's or Zed's weekend. You have Kismet at a .79 overall, and you have Zed at a .72 overall. On top of them making a role swap, moving Luca to the main AR and Dens to the flex, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense when you have Dens that's lighting it up at like a 1.5 pretty much event after event as the main AR. And yeah, Luca wasn't amazing, but he was doing his job as the flex person. And then you move him to the main AR and he only puts up a 1.16. So it's like, what would you rather do? I mean, I don't know about Luca's career and what roles he's played up until this point, but I know for a fact that Dens has always been a main AR. So not really sure what they were thinking with that change. Yes, you got to do things to make people comfortable, but I mean, who's a better main AR, Dens or Luca? That's what it comes down to. And if Dens, which we have seen, looks to be the better main AR, then Luca needs to suck it up and just learn the role. That's what Mox did with Skies, and heck, they won an event. So you just got to do the same.
Yeah, I agree. I think yes, you. I mean, maybe I should have taken that back. You can point fingers at who's being inconsistent, but I mean, like this Paris roster, like I think they have it. I don't know. We'll see when it comes around to champs time, because at this point none of these events matter too much. If you're one of the last place teams, you're just gonna start off in the losers bracket and it's gonna suck. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're out of it. That being said, it's do or die for Paris then, and I do think that they're gonna fall to one of those last place spots as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if at the start of the season they start off hot, but our season predictions before anything started is correct, and Paris ends up as the last place team because of their inconsistencies, because of teams catching up in the strategy and how the game evolves, and their their overseas preseason practice amounts to kind of nothing in the end because teams figure them out. So should be very interesting. And I think Paris does need to start worrying about kind of any pool that they get put into, because now whenever I see Paris, it doesn't matter what other three teams are in that bracket. I'm going to be extremely concerned if they can actually put it together and make it out. And
I can't say anything else on Paris at this point. It just kind of aggravates me because I do think that they have the potential, but they just squander it.
yeah, I think a lot of teams you could say have potential, but if they can't make use of that potential, then it's going to waste. Moving on to our second Group B matchup, both got this one correct. It was the London Royal Ravens versus Optic Gaming LA. However, it was a much closer series than either of us would have thought. London took it in 3-2 fashion over Optic, and Optic is one of the key teams in this because after they lose to London, they make it all the way to a grand finals. JCap is gone, Chino is in, and they make it to a grand finals. Was JCap the problem? That is the question.
I mean, statistically, yes. Like, and this is
You
kind
would
of the
say
writing on the wall.
statistically yes, but Chino put up he performed as well as I believe JCap would have if JCap was on this team. I mean, you look at his stats across the board, there might be some things Chino is doing better. And because I don't have a one-to-one comparison, I can't confirm that. But if you just look at the KD portion, Chino's performing as well as JCap. And so
I think the other thing you can attribute the success to is TJ was definitely stepping it up. Slasher definitely felt a lot more comfortable. You know, he seemed like he was in the right spots at the right time. Kenny was playing very much an objective style, and I think that fits his play style a lot more. And Dashy was just Dashy this weekend. I mean, I really can't say it any other way. You've seen the kind of absurd things that Dashy has done, and in Black Ops 4, and he started to see we started to see like a come to form Dashy this weekend. So everybody on the Optic team played pretty well. Will they do that next event, or will the next event that they're in? Because I'm not sure if they're in Seattle. Oh, they are.
yeah,
Will they do it next event? Who knows? Depends on if they decide to show up. So I'm not gonna discredit them that much. I think that they had a really good tournament, and I'm excited to see where Optic goes from here. But I mean, this particular match, London did kind of play well, but the problem with London this event is whenever we get to the Atlanta-London match, it seemed like the wind was taken out of their sails, and this was very, very important in both your and my eyes for London to do well in this event, and not making it to the semis. Well, we said not making it to the finals would be bad for London, but I mean they didn't even make it to the semis. So yes, they got a win against Optic. I don't understand. I'm not sure about the what that means for London, since Optic was a finals team this event and they were the only team to, or they were one of the teams that beat them. I'm not sure.
I mean, I said it and I will stand by it. If London didn't make a finals this event, they should be worried. And even though Optic is the team that knocked them out and Optic made the finals, and the other team that beat them was Atlanta, who made the finals, you got to start beating these teams. You got to start taking matches off some of these upper echelon teams. Otherwise, you're never going to advance into their range. And that's what we
Yep.
said. We said London needs to start beating these upper bracket teams, but they can't.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think one of their biggest weaknesses right now is their domination. They were 0-3
yes.
on this weekend in domination. That is the swing game mode that can pick up a team that is down 0-2 and make it go all the way to a game 5, and they are not winning those game 3s.
Well,
And so it's a complete reset of momentum. They're winning the hard points, or at least they won the 2 hard points they did play against OGLA in the first time these teams met up, but they're just not winning those game 3s, and I think that's where this team is really failing.
yes, and while I will say that the London Atlanta domination was probably one of the best dominations all year. If you're listening to this and you haven't watched it, go back and watch that. That's probably my match of the entire event. Or my map of the entire event was the Atlanta London domination. You're absolutely right. Like it's too late in the season now to say, oh, domination's not a real game mode. You know, we don't have to work on it. We can just be fine at hardpoint search and be okay.
Bringing up that point you just said, apparently there was a CDL players meeting where they were discussing getting rid of Dom as a game mode from the CDL map pools or game mode pool set, which to me, this is like middle of the season. It's like, are you serious? You're really going to do that? That can completely change everything. And it's
Yeah,
like, what are they going to move it to? That's also a question. But
I
that
mean,
to me just seems like a really bad and terrible idea to do halfway through the season. You should not be switching game modes halfway through the season. That's just an awful idea in my eyes. But I did want to bring that point up since you were discussing domination and
now
why
that you
teams
mentioned it,
need to practice
that
it.
makes Octane's tweet more. It makes more sense now because he tweeted out like best third game mode, and it was uplink.
Yeah, we
And
all can agree Uplink is the best third game mode,
yeah,
but only for jetpack
yeah,
games.
only for jetpack CODs. And yeah, you definitely can't do boots on the ground. Like, look how look how quickly the competitive World War II scene changed from gridiron to capture the flag whenever they realized, oh, this actually sucks. No thanks. It's it would be interesting if they changed to I'm guessing capture the flag in CDL.
I'm really not a big fan of capture the flag though. Like the Dom matches, at least there's always kills going down. And this past weekend, we saw some actually really fun competitive dominations with some
Yeah,
crazy comebacks. Crazy comebacks.
no, I
I mean, you
100%
look at
agree.
the Paris St. Petrograd series versus Optic Gaming, where Optic Gaming came back in absurd fashion. Then you also had the Optic Gaming Toronto domination, where they were almost able to bring it back
Yeah, that's
in
true.
an absurd fashion. And then, I mean, there was even one in the Challengers this weekend with Team Wester versus Parasite's team. I can't remember the name of it, but there was what were those the two teams? I don't think I'm getting the teams right, but there was a huge 60-point comeback in like 2.5 minutes in that series
Yeah,
where they
that's
just spawn
unbelievable.
trapped them on Gunrunner and they just kept them there for the whole 2 minutes and 30 seconds pretty much. So yes, it sucks that like that's kind of how teams come back is they put teams in these absolutely disgusting spawn traps. That's something that could be fixed with obviously Modern Warfare not having crap spawns, but then that gets rid of some of that comeback opponent, but maybe also you don't need that kind of comeback component if teams aren't able to put teams in spawn traps to actually build up that lead. So it's a huge debate. I can see why they had a player meeting on it, but it's already like halfway through the season. Why you can't change the game mode halfway through the season? That just
Yeah,
doesn't
true.
make that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, I think I agree that domination is not an ideal game mode for competitive. I will say that the developers really haven't helped at all at fostering a competitive environment for Modern Warfare title, and like there's obviously going to be a lot of like turmoil because of it. What really sucks is the timing of all this, which is you have Modern Warfare come out, a lot of hype generating it. CDL gets announced, so CWL turns into CDL. Lots of hype behind that, and then the title is, you know, hardly working in the very beginning. Lots and lots of fixes and patches and all this crazy stuff. They decide to prioritize stuff like Warzone over competitive game modes, ranked playlists, all this other stuff, and it's really, really, really hurt the competitive scene in a crucial year for them to get off the ground. The last thing I want to see is something like Overwatch League, where I'm really not sure what the history or what the future of the Overwatch League looks like. And that was a lot of what a lot of people's concerns were whenever the CDL was announced. But yeah, this is oh, I'm really really not sure how to quite possibly like put this in a good way. It's clear that the players are upset. That being said, they have kind of a right to be upset. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I already kind of said my 2 cents. Yes, we know that not a lot of developer support has gone into the competitive side. At this point in kind of the season, I view it as a lost cause. There's no point in even talking about it anymore, which kind of sucks because you want
True.
to keep on bringing it up so that change can happen. But I mean, I'm fine with hard points. I'm fine with S&D. At this point in the season, I'm fine with Dom. Like you either figure out a different game mode to play at the start of the season, or you're sticking with that throughout the entire season. To me, making a change at this point just doesn't make too much sense, especially when you look at like what are the other options? There's no control. There's a CTF, and that is pretty much the only other viable option that I can think of, unless they've added something to the game that I don't know of, or they're going to add something to the game. But
They recently added demolition, but demolition is too close to search, and I think is also kind of a spawn trap fest.
yeah, I can't imagine they would do demolition. That's more of like a party game mode
Yeah,
than
for sure.
anything.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you at this point. Like it just makes sense to go through the rest of the season as just play the Dom. Yeah, I know it's not the most fun. It's very hard to get comebacks without doing degenerate things like spawn trapping. The developers are starting to get better about supporting the CDL, especially with all of the COVID stuff and the transition to online. But it's still not where they need to be, in my eyes. I'm not saying they need to give the whole game to competitive, but they definitely need to, brush up on some things. And at the end, Call of Duty shouldn't be the same every year, but the competitive side should remain relatively the same. We shouldn't have like tumultuous changes in how the competitive scene is shaped every single year because of developers.
And I think that kind of opens up a huge bag of discussions and topics that we can definitely bring up another time in a
For sure.
later podcast. But going to shift the focus back to the matches. Our first winners bracket match in groups, we saw Minnesota take on Toronto, which Toronto took over Minnesota in 3-1 fashion. So when we talked about Mox and Havoc having a bad event, well, for Minnesota, we need to talk about GodRX because he did not have a good event.
And that's
Now,
that's really
not
unfortunate
a
too.
GodRX event.
Yeah,
Not a GodRX.
exactly.
He had a .88. That's not bad, but it wasn't what we've been seeing from GodRX.
No, I mean your best player pulls a .88, you're obviously going to struggle this event, and that was pretty obvious throughout the entire event. Minnesota also had a not as bad as Florida, but just about as bad as Florida showing. The only notable thing is they did beat Florida 3-0, and they did pull a round off of Toronto. Honestly, these two games back to back, Toronto, New York, where Toronto pulls a 3-1, and then Toronto, Minnesota, where Toronto again pulls a 3-1, gives me kind of I don't know. I think I'm really really hopeful at this point for Toronto, and I would like to say that this isn't some like one-off event, but this definitely says like, hey, and you said the stats to support it. Hey, Toronto is here to stay. This is kind of the real deal. This is whenever I personally was like, oh, that wasn't a fluke that Toronto won, because at the end of the day, like New York had one good event, last event, and we were like,
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how New York is. They look exciting with Mac, but we'll see. But no, New York's the real deal, and because they made it to the playoffs, or sorry, to the semis. Minnesota was the real deal beforehand. Like they were a great team before this. What a lot of people said, top five. They're top five in the standings, and Toronto beat them both, and didn't just beat them. They brutalized Minnesota. It was not even close. Like
Yeah.
it
The
was.
hard points were a bit of a massacre. Toronto beat Minnesota by 58 points in their first Hackney Yard. That map obviously is going to be extremely scrappy just because of how small it is. However, the Ramazda, it was not even close. They beat Minnesota 141 by 141 points. That was a 250 to 109. So almost 100-point clubbed Minnesota in that one.
And what's awful is Minnesota was, the one game where we were like, all right, Minnesota definitely has hard point down. That was the one we were like, you know what? If they could just improve their search just a little bit, their hard point can come and it will be fine. Fundamentally, they were a great hard point team, and they got blasted by Toronto. They
Yeah,
just
and looking at, well, okay, I guess I see where their pick and bans were, because, well, I'm assuming they played Toronto on Hackney and they played them on Ramazda. I'm assuming the Azir Cave was a ban for Toronto against Minnesota since they're
yeah.
6-2 on that, and then I'm assuming probably Minnesota banned Gunrunner since they're 2-4 on that, and then they picked Hackney, and the only other map they could pick, I guess, for Toronto was Ramaz's St. Petra, excuse me. And I guess they went with Ramazda. Minnesota played Ramazda 3 times this weekend. They went 1-2 on that map. So things to fix on that one. It was against, I don't like, it's hard to say. Everything's kind of like event to event. Maybe there's not like a huge overlapping problem. I'm not going to say Minnesota's a bad team. I'm going to say they
No,
just had an off event.
I think
I think
so.
you can clearly see that in how GodRx's performance went throughout the weekend. And I was watching the New York versus Minnesota matchup, and GodRx had an awful time in that hard point. It seemed like every time he was getting just picked off on rotations or wherever he was going, Temp was there to just seek him out and kill him. And so it's maybe teams are kind of picking up on other teams' tendencies. And right now, it kind of seems like the bottom's rising up, and we're just going to have to throw pretty much, you got Atlanta and Dallas at the top, and then everyone else is just in a soup. It's going to pretty much be like how the LCS was, where you had Cloud9 at the top, and then you had CLG at the bottom, and then in between that was just the soup of all the other teams, because pretty much anyone can beat anyone in the soup. You're all competing for your taste buds.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of teams that are just, any given Sunday they can beat each other, and I think it's balanced. I do think, looking at a lot of the rosters, I was like, this is pretty fair. Like these are pretty good teams. There's some teams that stood out, like Atlanta, of course. I mean, whenever you hear the roster, you're like, wow, what? But I mean, I think there was a lot of other teams that I had the same reaction. Like New York, for example. Whenever I heard their roster, I was like, "Wow, that's insane." Chicago, obviously. Dallas was another one. But we've definitely seen that, for the most part, everybody else kind of got dispersed, like pretty well. And now that we're midway through the season, it's pretty obvious to tell that everybody's everybody's pretty good. So
Yeah.
it's it'll be interesting every time that I see, every time we see an event to see who's gonna come out on top and all of that. Like to say that it's probably gonna be Atlanta, Dallas, or Chicago in the finals every event from here on out, but we'll see.
Yeah, and this is why kind of those early homestand wins are going to be even more important, since they had that early lead. As kind of the league gets more and more competitive and teams catch up, those points are going to keep those teams at the top if everyone's just starting to split
True.
50-50 and everyone's just beating each other. So,
Yeah, I think that's also a good point. Is getting those early wins was incredibly valuable. It said that those teams had their stuff together. They worked and grinded and tried to assert dominance early on. And as the chips fell, you know it was easy enough to just stay in the lead coast. I mean, if Dallas, Chicago, and Atlanta just make it to the semis for the rest of the season, they will keep their top three spot. The other side of that coin is that when it comes to champs, all of these teams will have a whole season of preparation, and it doesn't matter how many points you have. I mean, whenever you get to champs, assuming it's kind of the same as it has been before. Whenever it gets to champs, whoever wins champs wins the season. So, you could have a team like Toronto, for example, who hasn't really been performing until this event, that could just show up for champs, and all of a sudden Toronto wins. It's unlikely that it happens, like the whole Genji thing with World War II, but it's still a possibility. And
Black Ops 4.
I wouldn't say E United was a team that showed up out of nowhere. I think they made one good roster change whenever they brought
Genji was in World War II.
Yeah,
I don't even remember them having a
they
roster.
won champs.
You mean EG?
Sorry, EG. My bad.
Okay.
EG.
I'm like, Gen G didn't get
Another
involved until
another
Black Ops 4.
another nameless gunless deal for me. Yeah, no, EG. I saw their logo and everything too, and I was like, oh yeah, like aches and
Yeah.
everything.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
G.
yeah,
Okay.
EG.
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
EG
I
didn't
think
do
the one
anything.
difference though at this one, well actually this is playoffs isn't champs, it's separate, I believe.
Hmm.
Correct?
I I thought
I'm not sure. Is playoffs champs now, or is there a separate champs where there's teams from outside the CDL? I'm not sure.
yeah, that's new to me. I thought
I
that
can't remember.
I'm not sure, but
I thought I might have just misread it at the start of the season, but I thought there was playoffs, and then I also thought there was champs, but there might just be playoffs. In which case, yes, everyone is at that event, but you're not really on equal footing simply because if you showed up earlier in the season and you were able to maintain your spot, hey, guess what? You're either the first or second seed. You got 2 round bye.
yeah, that's true.
You're already top four. Or yeah, top four or top six. Maybe I think maybe it's top six since there's a losers bracket. But yeah, you're already way up there in the money. So if you're Toronto, if you're one of these teams 9 through 12, your road's a lot harder, especially since you start in the losers bracket. You don't even get that free loss. So definitely still stands. But we're going to move on since we don't want to make this a 3 hour long podcast. We're going to move on to
Yes,
our
I'm
Group
not.
B winners round one, where we saw the likes of Atlanta versus London. Atlanta took that 3-1 over London with a little asterisk,
Yeah,
obviously, because of that first hard point where Scraps wasn't there. London started team killing, think they were going to get a reset, and lo and behold, they did not. So, I mean, during that time, Atlanta was just racking up points, and they won that one pretty easily as a result. I think once London actually started playing, they were already down by like 150 points or
yeah, it
something.
was like over 100
So,
points. I mean,
and I do want to talk about this just a little bit because, as being someone who's been a ref at the open events for the CWL in the past, yes, you need to be ready. If you say you're ready to go and the game starts, then they're not going to restart it. And the worst thing you can do, just like the thing we always tell the open bracket teams every single time, is keep playing the game until we end it or until we tell you to stop. Because until that point, the game counts. So obviously, London, like all these teams should know that they just need to keep playing. The worst thing you can do if there is an issue at the start of a game is start team killing. That is the worst thing you can do because if the other team keeps on playing and you don't get a restart, well, guess what? You're down 150 points, which is exactly what happened. Now, I don't know all the circumstances around what happened, so I'm not going to even go into. But the rules are rules. They know the rules. And I'm not going to agree or disagree simply because I don't have all the facts. But this is just what I know from reffing these matches.
I think if you so they were down a 4v5. Scraps was on the map. Like he was spawned in and
Yep.
he just had to pick up his controller and start playing. Despite all of this, if like you said, if you just started playing and I mean you had a favorable spawns on Hackney, you were on good side. Uh, you just go through the motions and try and just keep your spawn and then, rotate into P2. You had a chance of maybe not winning that event or maybe not winning that map, but you had a chance of like buying time for Scraps to get back on and then kind of evaluating. Okay, what's going on? Let's figure this out, and it would have been a lot closer. But yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, I wish there was more leniency with the rules, with all of this that's going on, being online and all of this. These guys are LAN players. Like they go to their
Yeah,
tournaments.
I don't mind it being so strict simply because these players they burn so much time in between matches and everything. Like
Yeah,
just
that's
trying to
true.
get them lobbied up and stuff is just one of the worst and most annoying things imaginable. How much time they just try and burn in between games just with silly things. And so once they say they're ready, they should be ready.
True.
And so I don't have too much empathy for kind of what went on. And like just play the game. Okay, yes. All right. He's not there. Play 4v5. He's going to be back. Don't just throw away an entire game for the possibility. Don't even know it wasn't confirmed that you were going to get a reset. So just play the game until there's a reset confirmed. Like that's what you should be doing. You're not going to see, oh, I can't even like really think of a real world example outside of maybe like one of your players gets injured in the middle of a basketball game, but the ref hasn't blown the whistle yet. You're not going to stop playing just because that guy's on the ground. You got to keep playing because the other team can score. Like,
Yeah, I agree. I think you're not wrong in saying that like these players do torch a lot of time, and that's kind of what's annoying. You hear the stupid Dragons commercial a million times because these guys are just playing on their phone or something. Like, oh hey, by the way, like I gotta answer, like I gotta tweet out something right now. Like, no, dude, you got a Call of Duty game to play. Like, let's play it. Let's get it over with. Move on. So that way we can get these get these games done. And yeah, from your perspective, it does make sense why you would say, "Hey, guys, we got games to play. Let's get the games in. Let's stop wasting time." But I don't know.
yeah, and I'm not saying like, oh, we got to rush people nonstop. Like, I understand, like, okay, you need a certain amount of time to get set up. You need a certain amount of time to warm up. But once we've given you a reasonable amount of time to do all that, like we're not giving you any extra time. We got a schedule to keep, and you should be ready to play. You're not going to see in a pro NFL match a team be like, "Oh, dude, we didn't get enough warm up time," and them delaying the game for 30 minutes so you can do your stretches or kick some field goals or whatever. You're not going to see
True.
that. If the game's supposed to start at 6 and there's a million some people watching on TV ready to get into the game, it's going to start at 6. So, and I one other thing I wanted to bring up was why wasn't the game just paused? What happened to the pause feature?
Yeah,
Like that was the big thing. Why do we even have this problem? Like we saw the pause feature, which is great. We've been asking that for years because of situations like this. As soon as you see the team kill, why don't you just pause? Like that is an indication that something's up, and you can't just have a ref yell, or you can't just have a player yell over at the ref who's at side stage watching the game. Like they're not in person. They got to text them in Discord or something. So to me, that's probably the biggest like what the hell actually happened here is like why the hell wasn't the game just paused? That to me is kind of the biggest issue I see with this situation. But
yeah,
talked about that enough. It was a London versus Atlanta matchup. We figured that London was going to lose that one. That they did. And so we'll move on to our Group A losers round one, which was Florida versus New York. And New York gave them a nice big old backhand and
yeah,
3-0'd them right out of this tournament. You thought it was going to be Toronto, Minnesota. Neither of those teams were in the losers bracket. I thought it was going to be
right.
Toronto, Florida. Only Florida was in the losers bracket, but I thought Florida would beat Toronto. Well, they're not here, Florida, and you lost to New York. So see you next time, guys, I guess. But I think one of the things we can talk about with New York is, yes, New York seems like a good team. It wasn't just a one event thing. Maybe is it just a 2 event thing? Who knows? But based on kind of what we're hearing from the community and the performance that they showed up against even an improved Atlanta from the Atlanta that we saw at the Chicago event, yeah, this New York team is looking like they're the real deal.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. New York with Mac has been like night and day at this point. I thought New York was a joke of a team before before Mac melts. Mac is all over the map. Mac is just playing out of his mind. Zoom is doing great. I think the general vibes of the team is so much better than the beginning of the season. It seems like things are just happening right. Anytime that you cut over to like an Astro Gaming listen in, it just seem like they're calm. They got the good vibes. They got all that all the stuff that the COD teams want. right now, and I do look forward to them continuing to make it to semifinals because I think New York is one of the better teams in the CDL now.
Yeah, the only thing concerning about New York is their domination. They're pretty bad in that game mode. They're currently 3-11. They went 2-2 on the weekend. They had a 9-game losing streak in domination. So just gonna have to see some better dom from them, and then they're gonna be scary. Then they're gonna be scary
True, very true.
because their hard points definitely been
Disgusting.
improving.
Oh my god, their hard point's great. Their search is unbelievable. Their domination,
Yeah, their domination.
eh.
We'll just not look at that for now. It's hidden away in the closet. We don't want to look at that. All right, but what we will be looking at is our next losers matchup, which was Paris versus OG. I thought Paris was going to beat Optic. Was very wrong. Optic 3-0'd Paris.
Yeah,
Last time we saw this, it went to a game 5. And the series, while it was still relatively close throughout, I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the hard point, yeah. So the hard point was a 250 to a 231. And the S&D was a 6-5. But after that, Paris kind of crumbled. The domination wasn't close at all. It was a 174 to a 133.
yeah, it was
And
embarrassing.
Paris actually had, I believe, a very significant lead going into the second half. I want to say it was around 40 points or so at the end of the first half. And yeah, they just got obliterated. Optic put them in one of the most disgusting spawn traps I've ever seen, and they weren't able to get pretty much a single point past the 3-minute mark of that second half of Dom, and that certainly goes to show it in that score.
Yeah, so a couple things to note. They played from behind. Optic played behind in the hard point and the domination, and they were both like significant margins. So it's not that Paris was really a bad team. They just literally could not close out the game, which is a bad thing. Like, I'm not saying they're a bad team. I'm saying they're a bad team, Nick. What I'm saying is that Paris, it's just like we talk about it whenever we say, hey, whenever you go to a round 11, game 5, every single event, and you drop it, like, are you really a good team? Like, yeah, you can go the distance, but can you really go the distance? And I think that was definitely something that we saw pretty consistently in this event, or sorry, in this match with Paris versus Optic, where Paris just could not go the distance. They could not just close out a game. They sat. I'm pretty sure that, and I can't remember this exactly. But I'm pretty sure that Optic came back from like 190 to like 231, and they won it. Like it was a deficit.
Yeah. And I think that's something to do with kind of how these hard points play. A lot of the lead, I think, for teams needs to be built off the first hard point because after that, it's just a rotation fest. And whichever team gets to the hard point first, they're pretty much going to be taking the lead off of it. They're going to be getting 40 some seconds, and the other team's not going to get really any outside of some contest time. That's kind of what we've been seeing so far throughout the year. And so that first hard point just seems to kind of be the most important one out of all, unless the spawns on the map are a little unequal, where there might be 3 hard points on one side of the map and 1 on the other. But I don't think there's really any too many that are like that. But yeah, Optic just seems like a very fundamentally strong team at the moment. I mean, I don't know if we ever talked about their fundamentals early on in the season since they were losing so much. But even throughout those matches, you kind of got a sense that they were playing the game the correct way. They just didn't have the slaying power and the stats to really back it up and bring forth a win. But I think throughout this weekend, that is incredibly evident, especially in their hard point, where the differential between how much they were outslaying or getting outslayed, between how much they were winning or losing the game, is incredibly close. When they're losing, when they're winning, it was incredibly large. And I think one example here, which is a series we're going to talk about very shortly, which was the Optic London rematch, Azir Cave, they only won by 1 kill. However, they won by 51 points. And one that you can look at for a loss. Their Atlanta matchup in the grand finals, St. Petrograd. They got outslayed by 16. They only lost by 18 points. And so these are kind of the thing that I'm looking at to see which teams are kind of fundamentally strong. And I want to bring back up that point that I mentioned in the prior one where Clayster and Parasite were saying, yeah, okay, you can get outslayed really heavily on a hard point and still win, maybe because a team is just farming kills on a certain hard point. And I
Yeah,
can kind of see that perspective, but I do want to, after watching this weekend of hard points, every single hard point, whichever team rotates to it first, it seems to be a farm fest. So at the end of the day, I think my point kind of still stands, and especially shows when you kind of look at the statistics in this Optic lineup.
yeah, I agree. Almost 100% on all that. Yeah, I mean, Optic played great this week. I for somebody who I was last podcast I was degrading Optic, telling them that it's terrible, it's abysmal, the performances, like everything that they're doing is bad. They
Yeah,
really turned it around. So I'm
it
pretty
was all
impressed.
bad. They had one good event. We'll see if they can have another good event.
True.
Currently, Chino is putting up kind of the same performance as JCap. However, something with him in the team is helping them to perform differently. Along with it, also was a good event for TJ. So if TJ goes back to putting up inconsistent performances, are we going to see this team suffer again? That's going to be a really big question. As well as it does seem that this Optic roster is looking for a change besides Chino. And that goes to the point of, well, they just released their head coach, Pac-Man, and they released Rallied, which is one of their content creators. So it seems like they're making room for some extra cap space or money so that they can make a trade to get someone that's maybe a little more expensive than they would have or previously liked in order to, if they wanted to keep Pac-Man and Rallied. So going to
Uh,
be interesting to see if what trades do occur in the next coming weeks, if any do.
yeah, I think that it will be interesting to see any trades that do come up with this. There's already some pretty big rumors where Pristini's going to Chicago, and it'll be interesting to see what makes that happen. Roster Mania is just around the corner. Well, hopefully just around the corner. It's really hard to tell what's going on with all the COVID stuff, but uh, it's about time. There's a lot of really good players on riding a Pine right now, Team Pine, and it'll be really interesting to see how things shape up with that. So
Yeah, should be quite interesting to see. But one other point I want to bring up is since Optic just removed their head coach, how much of an impact do you think that will have on their team? In my opinion, I don't think it will have realistically any. I didn't really like the idea of Pac-Man being a coach. I don't think he really, in my eyes, really offers too much to that team or any team really that has Slasher on it. It's going to be kind of hard to get a coach that is going to really improve the team kind of more than Slasher already can with his ideas and everything. I
yeah,
think
true.
he knows how the game needs to be played. And I'm going to reference Hard Points again because I do love that podcast. You go check it out. It's on TP's channel. I believe it's just youtube.com/TP maybe. But Crowder brought up another good point, as he does, is that coaches in Call of Duty, it's a lot less about the strategy and teaching players how to play the game, and more so kind of about player personalities and managing the team in that aspect and how they kind of cope with victories and losses and are able to communicate their thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You have to get a lot of these egos, these personalities, all under check. And the other thing as a coach is you have to get in there and during a loss, you have to kind of get your guys' mind off of it, like get them focused for the next, hey, you dropped one, no big deal, focus up, move on. And that is something that is, yeah, I think that Slasher does a pretty good job of that anyway, and maybe JCap to a degree, and that's why people, are saying that, JCap is going to move into the coaching position over Pac-Man, but it's at the end of the day, I mean, you're not like these guys, these kids, like they already have the strategies. They already know how they're gonna play. Last year, Crimsix, tried to put all of this like, coaching like, hey, let's be serious, guys, kind of thing. And the kids then they didn't want anything from it. So it's hard to say that this is the right call or this is the this makes sense until we actually like see all the chips fall on the table, and I think that's gonna be coming very very soon.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why coaches maybe don't mean as much from a quote unquote coaching aspect in kind of the strategy of the game is because in kind of Call of Duty and in other esports, the players have kind of grown up learning the strategy and figuring out the strategy of the game themselves. Whereas kind of in regular sports, players don't really focus too much on the strategy, I feel more so they focus on the physical prowess and building kind of their physique to
True.
be able to control their body to excel in whatever atmosphere that you want. Since in kind of regular sports, you can overpower a really good strategy with just brute strength in a decent number of cases um, at kind of the lower levels. And so it's not really until you get to the upper levels where you actually really start kind of learning that strategy. But you have a coach to kind of teach that to you at that point. Whereas in Call of Duty, since it's such kind of a young group, players usually they develop their gun skill, but then since they're kind of running through that amateur scene and there's not really too many coaches in the AM scene, after that they got to focus on developing the strategy that's going to help them move up even further, potentially into the pro league. And so that's kind of why I would say that a coach is maybe not as helpful as you would see a coach normally being in kind of a regular sport compared to kind of esports. I do still think there's a lot of important coaching duties. Obviously, one is managing all the players' kind of personalities and everything, as well as looking at kind of all the numbers and giving your time to look at the tape and review that and bring up talking points maybe for when you do rod reviews with the players to kind of point certain things out so that they're able to pick up on players' tendencies a lot more quickly. But that's it for kind of that topic. Moving on to our Group A, losers round 2, we saw Minnesota versus New York, and New York gave Minnesota a swift 3-0. So not really too much to talk about. We talked about New York. We talked about Minnesota. Minnesota maybe having an off event. New York looking like the real deal. And so I feel like we've just been talking kind of about all these group matches. And I do want to move on pretty quickly to give our Seattle predictions. So I'm just going to move on to our Group B losers round
That's fine with
2.
me.
We saw Optic Gaming LA versus the London Royal Ravens. That was a rematch. However, maybe after that loss to Atlanta in, I guess, somewhat disappointing fashion after that restart didn't happen. I mean, realistically, I don't think anyone saw London taking that series. They lost that first hard point, obviously, because there wasn't a reset. However, the Dom and the second hard point weren't really close. The second Dom was as big of a point deficit as the first Dom. So, or second hard point was as big of a point deficit as the first hard point, excuse me. So, didn't really ever see London getting out of that group, at least as the first seed through beating Atlanta. So they moved down, faced OG again, and OG was looking hot on the day, and they gave London a 3-0. So not really too much to say there. London needs to start kind of really, don't want them to worry because then that just maybe will make them play even worse, but they definitely need to start picking up wins against teams that are on equal footing with them, since they clearly haven't been able to take wins against teams that are above them in the standing.
Yeah, true.
Moving on to our first semifinals matchup, it was Toronto versus OGLA. Probably a semifinals matchup that no one predicted.
Yeah,
However, it
gosh.
was an incredibly fun and interesting one. A bunch of crazy comebacks, bunch of really close series. However, OGLA was able to take it 3-2 over Toronto in that game 5. And I believe that game 5 went all the way to around 11 on Arclough Peak. So close for Toronto, and yet so far.
I do say that Toronto made a huge, huge, huge improvement in my eyes, and getting this close against a team that went to the finals, and also kind of showed up out of nowhere is still really impressive. And if I was Toronto, I couldn't be any happier with this result.
And no one had them getting out of the group, let alone making it. Well, if you make it out of groups, you make it to semifinals. But no one had them making it out of this group. So they should be incredibly, I guess, happy with their semifinals, after they should still be looking to drive forward and improve on that performance. And so I said it was really close. It was really close. First hard point, 250 to 229. Second hard point, 250 to 227. The S&Ds, it was a 6-2 and a 6-5. And then the domination was as close as you can get without having to replay it. It was a 141 to a 142. So
Yeah,
crazy series at that. And our second semifinals, which was Atlanta versus New York, was just as crazy. It was another game 5,
unbelievable.
and this went to Atlanta as well. So, like, these semifinal matches are honestly the best throughout. The semifinal matchups are the best matches the entire weekend, and then the finals always seems to just be like somewhat disappointing since it doesn't go to a game 5. This grand finals, it was a 3-1 for Atlanta over Optic. Finally, someone was able to stop the OG hype train, and Atlanta was able to stand strong and cement themselves as one of the best teams in the game. I'm still not placing them better than Dallas. I'm not placing them better than Dallas simply because Dallas, they beat them. Yes, it was
True.
a worse looking Atlanta team. I'm not going to move Atlanta out of the tier that Dallas is in. Those two teams are still in that same tier. I said if Atlanta didn't win this event, I'd be moving them down. However, they did. So Atlanta staying up at that top tier, that S tier with Dallas. However, I'm not going to move them above them simply because they didn't play them. They did play a bunch of really tough competition throughout this entire weekend. However,
I
like
will
we
say
saw
this.
Florida, we saw New York, we saw Minnesota, but they didn't face any of them in the finals. You had two teams that only had 20 points at the start of the event in the semifinals, and then you had New York, who only had 30 points. So,
I will say this briefly. Even though Dallas beat Atlanta, and you believe that Dallas is the number one team, there were some teams here that played out of their minds. Just some really, really, really good Call of Duty this weekend. One of the best weekends to date, and I don't think that this discredits Atlanta's win this event at all. I think that yes, there wasn't a Chicago here, yes, there wasn't Dallas here, but at the end of the day, these teams showed up to play. And I would have loved to see Dallas in Atlanta's shoes. I would have loved to see Chicago in Atlanta's shoes, and watch what they could do, so that way we can get an accurate assessment of how good these teams actually are. So it'll be very exciting to see these teams moving forward.
yeah, and I don't want to discount Atlanta's win. They won. That's still an incredibly difficult thing to do. As we saw, two of the other top 5 teams that we had in Florida and Minnesota, they didn't even make it out of their group. So each of these homestands, you got to give it your all and you got to put in your all. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself bowing out in the group stage. And so, honestly, I'm not even considering Chicago one of those teams. I don't think Chicago would have done well at this event. They
No,
don't
I
seem
wouldn't
to
have.
be at the top of their game. And literally the only reason I'm not putting Atlanta above Dallas is simply because they didn't play Dallas.
True.
Dallas is currently the number 1 team going into this weekend. They didn't play them at this weekend. So in my eyes, you can't move Dallas out of that number 1 spot. Now, are Dallas and Atlanta in the same tier? 100% they're in the same tier. However, in my eyes, you can't say definitively that Atlanta is better than Dallas until they play again.
Okay.
And so that rounds out not our predictions. What am I going to say? That rounds out the Florida homestand. Moving on now to our Seattle predictions for this coming weekend. In Group A, we have London versus the LA Gorillas, as well as Seattle versus New York. And then our Group B, we have Paris versus Chicago and Minnesota versus OGLA. So Atlanta and Dallas are not here. We do have Chicago here. And so if Chicago needs to win this event to move out of the soup.
Right.
If Chicago doesn't win this event, they're stuck in the soup as well as every other team. So this is going to be a pretty interesting event.
Oh,
we
for
saw
sure.
Seattle looking okay-ish. Again, they got the Gorillas in their group, so if they lose, they'll at least get 1 win. They'll at least get 10 points.
You say that. You keep saying that, but like Dallas finally beat Chicago,
it would be their 5th
so
time. It would be their 5th time beating the Gorillas.
Is 5th time the charm? Is that what happens in the CDL? You know?
I mean, well, for Dallas, it was the 4th time. So.
Oh, true. So I don't know. Maybe Seattle just has their number all season.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to agree with you with the first one. I'm going to give it 3-1 to London over the LA Gorillas. The LA Gorillas, it seems like they can not only lose, they've lost to other teams, but they beat OG at the Chicago event. However, OG made a roster change and made it to a finals since then. So it's kind of hard to really gauge where the Gorillas are at. However, even with kind of London's failures at this Florida event, I still have more faith in them to kind of take this series over the Gorillas than I do have for the Gorillas to take it over London. Simply based on kind of the performances that we've seen from the Gorillas at the past couple events, and knowing that kind of Florida was an incredibly competitive event where you saw a lot of the top upper echelon teams that we saw as that kind of falling down to some of these lower ones, the lower ones catching up. So yeah, this is another group. So this is another group. If London doesn't make it out of this group,
yeah,
they are definitively in the soup. They're
Yeah.
definitively stuck in the soup, and they're going to stay there for a good long while, in my eyes, unless they win the event after this or something crazy. But yeah,
This will not be easy though. They should have done it last event.
They should have done it last event. They should have, but I don't think any of us saw
Anything
Gaming LA
happening.
Yeah, we didn't really see anything happening. We were pretty much wrong across the board.
Yeah, it felt kind of bad as somebody
Yeah.
who's doing this on the regular.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. No one got a lot of things right. Okay, so in the group stage, the only thing I got wrong was Toronto versus New York. But after that, I got a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
So hopefully looking to have a better record this time around. Hopefully getting a similar record to maybe the Chicago homestand. I did pretty well on those predictions. But yeah, I'm going to agree with you. New York over Seattle. New York's been looking lights out. A bunch of teams have been praising them. Seattle was looking kind of on the up and up. However, New York's just looked a lot more solid than Seattle has. I mean, that's just not really too much to say. New York's looked good in the S&D. Seattle's been looking poor in the S&D.
Oh,
the
gosh.
best game mode for Seattle was their Dom. New York's bad at Dom. So, what? Yeah. But the hard points for New York have been pretty scary. That's been looking like probably one of their best game modes up there with their search. Their search has also been looking lights out. So
I could definitely see them going 3-1 if they pull off both hard points. They lose either of the hard points, and you know what happens, Nick. You know what happens if Seattle goes to Game 5.
Game 5 S&D.
Game 5 S&D.
Giving it to Seattle, no.
So
3-1 New York. I think Seattle probably takes the Dom.
Yeah.
Um, New York's been looking better in Dom since they did go 2-2 on the weekend, but that's been looking like Seattle's best game mode. So it'll be interesting to see. Definitely.
True.
Next matchup: Chicago versus Paris. Paris has been an incredible coin flip. Chicago, they don't have gunless. They're gonna have general. So you're going to have a new honeymoon period for the Chicago Huntsmen. Maybe that's just what the Huntsmen want to do. They want to keep on shifting players around so they can keep on getting that honeymoon period going, since that seems to be when Chicago and those players are at their best, is when they kind of have a fresh new feel, kind of like in a new car. It's that new car smell,
The new
Chicago.
car smell.
So
That's
they just
something.
we perpetually need that new car smell, Chicago, if they're going to be picking up wins. So I'm gonna give Chicago that 3-1. I'm gonna agree with you there. Minnesota versus OG.
This one's a tough one in my eyes.
Yep. So do we think? I mean, last time Minnesota played OG, they got stomped. Minnesota lost 3-0, and it wasn't even close. It was not
Right.
pretty at all.
That was a bad event for GodRx. So.
No, no, no. That was the event they made finals. That was the Los Angeles event. The past event was bad for Goddard X.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true.
yeah. Minnesota didn't play OG in Florida, but
Oh, huh.
Are
Yeah,
we
that's
gonna
right.
stick? Are we gonna stick and say, yeah, this OG team, yeah, they're actually that good, or are we gonna say maybe it was just a fluke? There was a bunch of kind of lower of the bracket teams there. London wasn't looking good. London hasn't really been looking that amazing. So, I mean, Toronto made it out of the group, but they were both 20 points at the start of the event. OG played Toronto, who was on equal footing with them in the standings. So it's like, how much stock do we give this OG team against Minnesota? And this is first match Minnesota plays. And if we know anything about prep with Minnesota, they've looked pretty damn good. So,
True.
I'm going to differ from you here. First time we're going to differ.
Okay.
So this is where we're going to see a bit of difference in predictions. I'm going to go with Minnesota over Optic Gaming LA 3-2. That's what I'm going to say. I don't think Goddard X is going to have as bad of an event. It'll be interesting to see if TJ is able to keep up that form that he had at the Florida event, as well as kind of if more cohesion comes with this Optic Gaming LA roster, since they didn't have a lot of time to practice with Chino prior to that Florida event. Maybe they get even better. So it'd be very interesting to see. Yeah, moving on to our Group A winners round one predictions. I'm going to have London versus New York as well as you. I'm going to give that to New York 3-1 over London. New
Three
York had,
one. Okay.
yeah, 3-1. I said New York was the second best team at that Florida event. It definitely shows kind of in their statistics if you go through kind of the overall KDs. The winning team in phase at that event, no one had below a 1.0 KD overall. So obviously they're going to win the event. If they didn't win the event with those kind of statistics, that'd be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Um,
Very close to that was New York. The lowest KD on New York was accuracy at a 0.98. Zoom was at a 0.99. Everyone else was above a 1.0. So that's kind of why I'm putting them as second best team. They only lost, well, they lost to Toronto. Probably got a bit shell shocked there. I imagine none of the players were taking going into that series were taking it as serious as possible. After they lost, they're like, oh wow, okay, yeah, Toronto's good. And then they 3-1 Minnesota. And then they 3-0 Florida, then they 3-1 Minnesota, and then they go to a game 5 round 11 against FaZe, who won the event. So New York was definitely the second best team at that Florida event in my eyes, and therefore I don't think London really stands too much of a chance against this current Subliners squad. That's why I'm going 3-1.
okay. Yeah, I can't agree with you anymore. London just looks good.
I mean, you could agree with me more, and you could say it was going to be 3-1 New York, but
I did say 3-2, but I do think that London is a solid team still, despite everything, and I think that New York has a better search game than most teams out there right now.
yeah. Definitely it will be interesting to see when/if this London squad gets nasty into the mix, how that kind of changes them. I mean, Shawnee hasn't been doing bad on the roster. However, they want nasty in the squad. And so some unfortunate visa issues with him is preventing him from currently playing with them. But they want him for a reason. They're just dealing with Shawnee kind of as a substitute now while they're waiting on all that pass over. So should be interesting to see kind of how the team evolves when they get him or if they get him into that roster. But currently, definitely don't think they got a chance of beating New York. Moving on to our Group B winners round one. It's going to be Chicago versus Optic Gaming LA for you. For me, it's going to be Chicago versus Minnesota. Both of us are in agreement here, though. We both have Chicago taking it 3-2 over their opposition. The last time Chicago faced Minnesota, I believe they 3-0'd them. It was a disgustingly close
Yeah.
3-0. I believe the hard point, Chicago only won by like 8 points. The Dom, they only won by like 5, and the S&D was a full sale. So not too much closer of a series you can get between those two. And so for that reason, I think this time around Minnesota is going to be able to take some of those W's over Chicago. Actually, why am I giving this is really troublesome because we haven't seen Chicago with General. But you still look at this squad and you still think they should win. And I feel like I'm going to regret my predictions a lot throughout this weekend. Honestly, my gut is kind of telling me that Chicago is going to drastically underperform this weekend. However, my heart is telling me that they won't. And so I'm going to go with the heart. In this case, I'm going to give Chicago the 3-2 over Minnesota. But
No, I think that you were right
I'm
about the
just
honeymoon phase with
I'm
General.
just like I feel like I'm just lining myself up for some heartbreak.
I mean,
And it's not like
that
I'm a
was a full
Chicago
event.
fanboy. I'm not a
No,
Chicago
I'm
fanboy. I
not
just
either.
want to see teams succeed.
True.
And so, but yeah, dude, I guarantee you, come Sunday, I'm gonna be crying, wrapped in a blanket. English is hard. Eating ice cream out of a tub because Chicago just like didn't even make it out of groups or something.
That's
Yeah,
that's pretty fanboy. I'm not even gonna lie.
that sounds pretty
That's
fanboy.
pretty fanboy. I don't think you're digging yourself out of that hole anytime soon.
Nah, dude, I'm the Seattle fanboy.
Oh, true, true. But Karma, 3 rings.
Karma 3 rings. I'm looking at your series. You said, "Oh yeah, is Chicago going to be able to beat the Gorillas for a fifth time in a row?" And you're saying yes to that. You have a 3-0 for Seattle over the Gorillas.
The
I'm
Gorillas.
not even going to say a 3-0 for Seattle over the Gorillas.
Three,
I'm going to say a 3-1 for Seattle
three
over the
one.
Gorillas.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying easy 3-0. Easiest 3-0 they've had all season.
Is it though? I mean, they had a really easy 3-0 against the Gorillas at their homestand event. That one was a bit of a blowout.
Here's
So
the
I don't
deal.
know if it'll be the easiest 3-0.
Here's the deal, Nick. I've been so wrong on so many of these, and I just need to say that Seattle beats the Gorillas. Because if I'm right, I'm right. But if I'm
Oh, so
wrong,
you're using like some reverse
I'm using
psychology of
like.
fate. You're like, I'm gonna say Seattle's gonna beat the Gorillas this time around, so they lose.
Hopefully, you think I hate to see the Gorillas just do this bad. I'm not even a fan or anything. In fact, I've never been a huge fan of old Patrick Price. Now he left. It's like if I have a little bit more respect for the team because you don't have an aging retiree on your team. No offense to Clayster or anything, but
Clayster is still youthful.
he's got the youthful spirit at the
Yeah,
ripe age of 27.
yeah. It's because he's still a troll. He's too much of a troll and too sarcastic to age.
All right, you heard it there. Nick's secrets to youth.
Secrets to youth and eternal life. You just got to be a big troll and be extremely sarcastic.
B main AR.
Be main AR. It takes less years off your life. All these sub players
Yeah,
that
entry
gonna
sub.
be come 50 years old. When they're 50 years old, they're gonna look like they're 80.
Yeah,
All the AR players are gonna
look at
be looking
Enable,
like they're in
man.
their 30s.
Is that too soon?
Too soon. Enable doesn't look super old.
No, but he's been playing sub his entire career for the most part, and
Yeah.
now he's on Team Pine.
Yeah, Team Pine. It takes a toll on your mentality. See,
True.
that's why Scump has a little insanity going on in his head. I always felt like he was a little crazy, and that you know what? That's probably why. It's because you need to be a maniac
Be cracked out of your mind
to be a main sub for your entire COD
for your
career.
entire COD career. Yeah. No, it takes its toll for sure. Playing
All right,
sub is not is
moving on to our Group B loser round one. I'm gonna have Paris versus OGLA, and if we learned anything from the prior matchup, this ain't gonna be close. I'm going OGLA 3-1 over Paris, and you're gonna give it to Minnesota over Paris since you have Minnesota losing to OGLA.
yeah,
And
yeah, I mean like it's the writing's kind of on the wall at this point.
yeah,
Paris is just not being a competitive COD team. I think that either Minnesota or Optic are looking like a competitor, looking like one of the top teams in the CDL. So yours is actually probably more of a blowout than mine, in my eyes. But
my 3-1 is more of a blowout. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
as far as like
Because we
score
have
lines
different
go,
teams.
yes, because we have different teams. I think Optic would blow out Paris more than Minnesota would.
Yeah, it's like Paris just needs Kismet and Zed to be on, and then they'll be competitive. But if they're not on, and it's one of those weekends where they're just bad, then yeah, they're just not going to be able to succeed. And so it's a bit unfortunate for them that these series span 3 days because, I mean, one day they can be on, one day they can be off. And so adding more days to the mix just gives them more ability to kind of let the inconsistencies flow and cost them a bunch of CDL points. So they need
True.
to just find some consistency. Otherwise, yeah, they're just never going to make it out of the soup. They're going to be stuck.
The soup.
I like the analogy, so I'm going to keep on using it.
The soup.
Our Group A losers round two, we're both going to have London versus the Seattle Surge. And you know what? I'm going to do the dastardly deed. I'm going to say
Fanboy. You're gonna fanboy right here.
London 3-2 over Seattle.
Ah!
I was thinking, I would give it to Seattle, but you know,
You cannot
London,
give.
London, London's S&D simply be. I was thinking, I'm like, could Seattle take a game 5 over London? I was
No.
like, you know what? Maybe they could. You know,
No.
London hasn't been looking that great, and I was like, wait, Luskin has a sniper.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Seattle can't win. Like,
Seattle can.
there's no one on Seattle that can snipe
I'm
at
pr-
like that competitive level that like Wuskin's dashy simp Cammy can. And so for that reason, like that a person that can run the sniper to their effectiveness on the map just gives them so much power, especially
True.
on maps such as Arklov Peak, that realistically I can't see Seattle taking a game 5 S&D against the likes of London.
It's good on every map when you're that good. That's the thing.
I mean,
So
I don't think anyone runs the sniper on Gunrunner.
yes, they do.
Well, not very often. There's some
It's
angles that you can get, but it's a lot
often
harder.
enough.
Often enough.
Often enough that it's
What
scary.
is Seattle's? I want to check out Seattle's win-loss record in S&Ds because I imagine they're really bad at our club. Well, they're probably bad at every S&D. All right, they're 3-3 on Petro. They're 2-5 on Gunrunner, and they're 1-3 on Arklov Peak and 0-2 on Ramazda. Ramazda, I don't think anyone runs snipers, but they're 0-2 on that. St. Petrograd, people definitely run snipers. So any map that like teams are able to run snipers on, Seattle's going to want to avoid. And so that's Arklov and that's Petro. Even though Petro is probably looking like their best S&D since they have a 50-50 record
You
on
can
that.
you can play Petro and avoid the snipe.
You can play Petro and avoid the snipe, but that hinders your gameplay quite a bit, I feel,
I
in
wouldn't
certain
say it.
scenarios.
I wouldn't say
Okay,
that
I
it
guess
hinders
not a
that
bit
much.
since I guess on Petra, you're kind of just only holding down that one sniper site, and it's really kind of more so to call out rotations more than anything. But that can definitely help give London a bit of an advantage in some rounds to get some early picks. So Piccadilly, you can definitely run a sniper. Seattle has never played Piccadilly Search, so I don't imagine they're going to be playing that this event. Ramasa, they're 0-2 on, so I don't know if they really want to play that. Honestly, I think they're going to probably just bite the bullet, do St. Petrograd, and hope they can win that. And then London's probably going to try and, if it's not banned, they would take Hardcloth Peak. But I can pretty much guarantee
Yeah,
that'll be banned, so London will probably take Piccadilly
true.
S&D. And since Seattle's never played Piccadilly S&D, they're going to lose that. So
Oh,
either
they're gonna lose
Piccadilly or
100%.
Arclov are going to be up, and I can't see Seattle taking either of those maps against London. So
I mean,
yeah,
the
I was thinking
London,
about it. I was considering it. I was like, maybe 3-1, maybe 3-1 they get it.
the
But
London Royal Ravens do get a game 5 in Piccadilly. For those who are geographically challenged, that is in London.
home team advantage,
Home
yeah.
team advantage.
Home map advantage. I
Yeah,
don't even know
they
what
live
to call it.
there. Come on, like Weskins lives in that scaffolding. Like he's got a little sleeping bag there and everything.
Yeah, I mean, you got a pretty good view. Might be too bad.
Top
Despite
scaff.
all the rain and weather. Maybe just get a little
Smoke grenades.
portable heater there. Yeah. All right. Jokes aside, yeah. All right. London over to Seattle, 3-2. Unfortunate. So sorry, Seattle. Moving on to our Group B losers round 2. It's going to be OGLA. Is it going to be OGLA for me? Yeah, it's going to be OGLA versus Minnesota. Yeah, so it'll be a rematch. And yeah, who am I going to give it to? You're giving it to Minnesota in the rematch here.
I am indeed.
I'm going to give it to OGLA in the rematch here. 3-2 over Minnesota. The last time OGLA faced a team in a rematch, it was the London Royal Ravens, and they crushed them.
True.
So I'm going with kind of a repeat performance from Florida in this kind of scenario. Minnesota, probably at this point, they predict OGLA to probably take Paris out. So they've probably been like, this is probably the team they're prepping to face in the losers.
Yeah,
Or
that's
even
what
in
I'm
the winners,
thinking.
even in the winners, I guess.
Yes.
Since if they beat Chicago, then they more than likely face OGLA over Paris. So this is probably a matchup they're preparing for quite effectively, I would imagine. However, I don't know. I'm going with the dark horse. Not really a dark horse at this time. They're gonna let me down. I know it. And so I'm gonna go with OG over Minnesota.
I was like, I'm not gonna put too much stock into one event because, I mean,
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
so, I mean, it's nice that they make it to, they make one win out of this, and I think Chicago's or it's not Chicago, sorry, I think Optics, that kind of team moving into events now, but
Well, actually, I had Minnesota faced OG in their first matchup.
yes,
I had Minnesota taking it there, but in the
I did
rematch, I don't
not.
know. Something just feels about the rematch.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
we both think something feels different about the rematch since you have Minnesota losing the first time around to Optic and then beating them the second time around. I have the opposite. So yeah, this is going to be a fun one for our predictions.
no, I think what happens is Minnesota's going to tighten up on the hard points and not force a game 5 against one of the best snipers in Call of Duty and a very, very strong search and destroy team. So
Yeah, Optic's looking like a pretty good search and destroy team with that Dashy TJ duo. It's just kind of, does TJ show up or not?
true.
That's kind of the question with this team. When they showed up, when they had JCap, they looked pretty darn good. They made it all the way to a semifinal in their homestand event. When TJ showed up with Chino, they made it all the way to a final. So kind of just rides on the back of TJ if he's performing or not, and if Kenny's putting up just a decent performance. We don't need Kenny to be a superstar. We just need him to put up a decent
True.
performance. So definitely gonna look interesting. And going back to the sniper battles, I mean, Goddard X has looked like a fantastic sniper, especially on
I am
Piccadilly.
so excited for the sniper battle between Dashy and GodRx because it is going to be lights out. They are going to absolutely post each other on the walls. Like it's gonna be a bloodbath. That's gonna be a huge part of this. The search and
yeah, I
destroys
mean,
are gonna be unbelievable.
speaking about snipers, the Simp versus Dashy Snipe where they traded in
They
the round
traded.
11?
Oh my God, that could have not been a better round 11
Dude, could you
start.
imagine if they were the last two players alive and they traded? I wonder how the game would have ended. I
I
wonder what would have
I
happened.
don't know. I truly don't know.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see how that
But that was
that works out.
unbelievable. They killed each other. Like that's
Yeah,
and that's the thing is that
pretty unbelievable.
oh my gosh, they can't. I totally forgot about that moment.
Yeah,
That was
that was
that was a wild
that
search
was
though.
awesome.
That was probably one of the
That
best search and
series
destroys
was
I've
pretty
seen.
wild.
Yeah, that
Oh
was
yeah, that search for destroy was definitely really fun. There was so many Arcloth peaks played that weekend, which was fantastic since that's probably one of the best, if not the best, search and destroy maps to kind of watch. It's one of the most entertaining in my eyes, definitely. So hopefully we get some more Arcloth search and destroys it, or Arcloth, yeah, Arcloth search and destroys. Hopefully I don't get sick of it though. That's just one thing. Moving on to our semifinal, you're gonna have New York versus Minnesota. I'm gonna have New York versus Optic, and I'm gonna give this to New York 3-1 over the OG squad. New York's been looking good for two events in a row. OG looked good for one event. However, we didn't see them at the other event that New York was at. But pretty much going off of what everyone's been saying and what I said about the Florida event, how New York was the second best team at the event, I'm going to stick with that. And I'm going to give the win to New York over this Optic Gaming squad.
yeah. I mean, I think that New York is just a really solid team. I mean, I have Minnesota over New York, but I think that New York strictly has a better search and destroy game than Minnesota. Like that's not even really a question at this point.
Who do
And
you have winning your series? You said you had Minnesota winning your series?
I had Minnesota beating Optic, and then I had New York beating Minnesota
Oh,
for
okay,
semis.
okay, okay.
So I mean, I think that New York goes to the finals this one. I don't think there's a doubt in my mind. They are primed to go into this hungry and looking for that finals.
Moving on to our second semifinal matchup, Chicago versus London. This is getting very interesting for the predictions. You have London taking it over Chicago 3-2.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think with the loss of Gunless, you do lose a little bit of that chemistry. Even though General's been picking it up and he's been at practices and scrims and he's wanted it, he's wanted to be there. I think that London has been playing pretty tightly as a unit, and their search and destroy has been better than Chicago's at the height of the as you would call it the honeymoon phase with the original squad. I think that Chicago is going to come out in this event and they're going to look really tough, but I really do think that London is really hungry too. And I think London wants it. And like you said, London should be nervous if they do not make it to the finals. They should have made it to the finals last time, but I'm going to go ahead and put them in the finals this time.
Yeah, London in a group of the LA Gorillas, New York, and Seattle. London definitely needs to look to make it at least to the semifinals. But if they want to actually be able to show themselves, to be able to move maybe to do I even want to go with the soup? Maybe it's a sandwich now. I don't know. I'm going to stick with the
Maybe it's
soup,
a
but
sandwich.
maybe they want to float on the top of the soup. That's London's goal. If they want to be able to float on the top of the soup, then they're going to need to make it to a finals. And I said it at the during when we were discussing the Florida event that Chicago's in the soup. Chicago's in the soup with London currently. This is that new car smell, Chicago. So maybe there's some onions. They're going to make me cry this event potentially, but I'm going to give it to Chicago over London. Even at the Chicago event, I think Chicago would have beaten London. The London we saw at the Florida event wasn't a good London. We haven't really seen a good London since the London homestand event. We've seen an on and off, relatively inconsistent Chicago of recent times. However, I still think that inconsistent Chicago is currently better than kind of what we've been seeing from this London lineup. And so for that reason, I'm giving it Chicago 3-1 over London. And so therefore, my finals matchup is going to be New York versus Chicago. And I'm giving it to New York 3-1 over Chicago. I think anyone, honestly, seeing how well seeing how well New York has played at the past two events, this is probably New York's event to win, to be honest.
Yeah.
I really do think it is. And an inconsistent new car smell, crying onions, Chicago Huntsmen, I don't think are going to have it in the tank to take out this newly refurbished subliner.
No, I think you're.
This is a subliner I want to ride in. And so therefore I'm going to ride them to the top of this event and
I
finals.
think you really need to work on your phrasing, Nick.
Well, isn't a subliner like a subway, or is it a person that
Yeah,
rides
but you can't say that you're gonna ride anything at this point. Like it's
ride
a little
inside
sus.
of New York?
All right, now you're. I think that the hole's been dug.
All right. I'll just let you talk about your talking point with New York versus London. I'll just walk away.
So I do think this is going to go down the search. I think this is going to go down to round 11. I think this is going to be the closest matchup this entire event, and it's going to be a nail biter to the finish because I think both of these teams are hungry and they want it. I think at the end of the day, you're going to have New York come out on top, but I could very, very easily see it go either way. Like if you told me, maybe you should think about, such and such on London, I might be like, maybe London does have it. I think this could go either way. Both these teams are phenomenal though, in my eyes, as far as consistency goes, for the most part. There's some issues to be considered on the side of London, but I think that they kind of brush that up and they make a really solid run into the finish.
You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Did you finish up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm back.
You left. You didn't even listen to what I had to say. Okay, yeah, I'm
No,
definitely
it was
done now.
unimportant. I saw you agreed with me, and that's all I care about.
Gotcha.
Your opinion's just here for a little extra spice added to the soup that we create each 2 weeks, I guess. Yeah, every 2 weeks. That's why you get paid the big bucks. You're the spice man.
Spice. The spice.
Minimum wage spice man.
The minimum wage spice man.
$0 spice man.
I'm the spice packet in the ramen noodles.
Yeah, pretty low budget like this podcast. But I enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoy it. And you know what else I hope you guys enjoy? I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I hope you enjoy the Seattle homestand event that will be happening. So grab a bag of popcorn, maybe some Doritos, or if you're healthy, maybe some nice chicken marsala. Who knows? But that's it from us. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Later.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I lowered the volume on my computer, but turned it up on the headset. So.
Speaking of turning up.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Optic had a good event.